racetrack, but gave each other enough respect and enough room to race each other without taking each other out, I think is why those guys separated from the field and put on the show they did. It was fantastic. But Lance Hallmark, kudos to him to hold off a very, very fast Rob Lindsay.
Yep.
Some other features we saw that night, Tracy Muse in the Hornet
That was
division.
interesting. Tracy...
He's won 4 out of 5, and he's won 4 in a row.
Right.
The only race he hasn't won was opening night.
Now, he lost the heat race, though, didn't he? Didn't he come in
he
second on the heat race? I believe he did.
I don't remember, but I know that he was just bad fast in the feature.
In the feature, yeah.
I mean, he has shown why he's got a huge, huge points lead in the Hornet division. 4 out of 5, 4 in a row is pretty impressive. I know there's not a lot of cars in that division, but when the other cars do show up, I mean, Tracy's still right there.
He's
still the guy
He's running that show.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Couldn't be to a greater guy either. I mean, Tracy's a great guy.
Oh, he's a fun guy.
His wife is great support. And just
good family.
Great
son-in-law's out there racing with them. And,
right.
Something else I wanted to talk about from the night the Wingless cars were there was Dan Dybel. You've heard us talk about Dan on the show multiple times. And it's not just because, he does a lot of good stuff for a lot of people. I want to talk about the performance he put on 2 weeks ago. It was absolutely, it'll be 2 weeks ago coming up. Dominant.
Yeah.
That 74 car got to the front, and I don't remember seeing anybody put a whipping on. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen somebody whip a field of cars like he did that night. I mean, just checked out, and that car would do anything he wanted to do. He said the week before, the car's pretty good. It's fast. I love it. It's got a little bit more.
And then that night, we saw him in the pits previous to racing, and he said, I got a good feeling about tonight.
He did.
He says, I feel really good about tonight.
He did, and he said
and
the car...
he showed us why.
Well, here's the thing. Now, at the Wild West Modified Series race, I sat up in the stands, and I sat with Norm Davis and Jeff Morrison and
Really, what did you guys do up there?
We had a great time watching the races. I'll tell you that. We had a fun time watching those races. But talking with those guys, here's what impressed me. Dan hasn't been in a race car. I mean, he's only been around in a few years. When he said there was more in that car, I thought, how?
You're right.
One, how?
Right.
So when I was up there watching the races with Norm and Jeff, that car came up, the conversation of him winning. And I said, what did you guys change? And they said, well, we made an adjustment here and an adjustment there. They told me what they were. And I said, oh, Norm's pretty good on these cars. Jeff said, Norm didn't make that call. He said, Dan figured that out. And I was like,
really?
Wow. And I'll tell you, it was something that I don't think a lot of guys would have thought of.
Wow.
I'm not going to say what it was.
Interesting.
But it was something I think most guys would have said, oh, this is what we need. And
Dan probably took a scientific approach to it, huh?
He did, and I think if they touch that car anymore, I don't know how much further that car can go. I'd hate to see it.
Well, just when we thought it was adjusted all the way out, there's still some more left as it was.
But for a guy that has been racing as long as Dan has, to make the call that he made on the setup, which is, like I said, not even Norm thought of it. And Norm knows those sport cars probably better than anybody in the country.
So obviously you're sitting with Norm, and he's giving Dan kudos for making that call.
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
They said, no, that was all Dan that made that call.
A lot about Norm Davis right there.
It does. It does. He's been around a long time. He's won championships with Russ, and he did very well setting up Thompson's car. And, anybody that's got a Swartz, I don't care if it's a modified or a late model, where do they go for advice?
Yeah.
Where's the first person they go? Norm Davis.
Yep.
And for, those guys to say, Dan made that call, it's kind of like,
interesting.
Wow.
You'll have to talk about this during the break.
Dan's taking this racing thing serious. I mean, he's reading, he's doing his homework, he's getting on the cars, and he's understanding what they're doing underneath him. And when you get a guy that can do that, that's got some ability to drive, I mean, we've seen guys like, guys that knew it. Bob Jeffrey. We've seen, Russell knew that stuff. We've seen Darren Koffel win championships like that. Trevor Glaser, Kyle Yeack. I mean, these guys that understand their race cars and what's going on underneath them. And you get a good driver in his seat. That's a dangerous combination for a lot of guys. And
Sure
I think the Super Sport deal for Dybel is these guys are in trouble this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, you usually don't quit messing with a car. You'll always keep dinking with it. You're always trying to get a little bit more out of it. I mean, even as much as like Kyle, even when he was doing really well and winning a lot, he was still tweaking that car every week. little adjustment here, a little caster camber, try this, a little shock
Try it,
adjustment.
find out what it does.
You're always going to keep, because if you don't sit on your laurels, they're going to catch you.
Well, and then the wise guy's going to do one adjustment at a time, go out and try it.
Exactly.
See what that did, because everybody knows you make more than one adjustment, then you don't know which one
You
is
go out
the
and you're
one
mad
that,
fast
that,
which one
that
worked.
did it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, let me counter that real quick, because when I crewed for Bob Jeffrey, I'll tell you, when I was in my 20s and I'd worked with David Hawks, and we were always changing something on the car.
On the V6?
And no, that wasn't the V. It was after that.
Okay.
Worked with Hawks, and we were always changing something on the car, and we were always changing something on Conway's car. We were changing something on Bill Pearson's car when I crewed for him, and all these different drivers. Don Irely even, we would make some changes. When I crewed for Jeffrey, it was you go to the racetrack, and I'm not kidding you guys, it was the most boring time I've ever had working on race cars. We would show up, would unload the car, and the only change, and I'm not kidding when I say this, the
Air
last
pressure.
year, it wasn't even that.
Really?
We would either change, air pressure, we'd change a right rear tire. We did not touch the suspension for nearly the entire season. Once he got that car comfortable, and where he liked it, just show up, unload, watch a track, set the pressures, race and load up.
That's amazing to have one setup that works on any kind of track.
Was that his V6 car?
No,
it was
after that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was an 8. Yeah,
He didn't have quite as much success in that car as he did his V6 car.
no, but he did win a championship after that.
Yeah, he did.
In 2001. But I mean, it was just when you get a guy, like I said, that's just really good driver, comfortable with his car, and they know what they like. Bob Jeffrey was kind of the example of that, because we just didn't change anything.
That was also back in an era, and
Right.
the top three guys, if one of them qualified bad, would elect to go to the back just to make for a better show that night, and you don't do that anymore with the quality of cars and the drivers we have now.
No,
You won't see anybody volunteer to go to the back just to go to the back.
You can buy them to the back, but they don't volunteer it.
That's right. Well, even then, I mean, we what did we have it a couple weeks ago? We put up a challenge for,
with who was
it was
that?
the late models. It was Todd Sieg, and it was who was the other car? Todd Sieg took it, and Todd drove from the back up to, I want to say, 5th or 6th.
Yeah, he did. He did well.
And the other car was I can't remember, but they didn't take it. They said, "No, we're not."
Well,
going
they kind of thought about it, and they went, "No."
Yeah.
No, they were kind of hesitant. But Sig was like, "Okay."
Yeah, he goes, "I'll do it. Why
Yep.
not? Extra $400."
He didn't even have to think about it.
And, and he did a good job. I mean, he
did.
drove up to, like I said, 5th or 6th that night, and was pretty darn good. But, the wingless night at Willamette it was a good night of racing. We didn't have a lot of cars.
Yeah,
We actually
small car count.
Well, that was one thing. We were hoping, Tom, to get down to the Wallbanger to see you guys run that cup, that Wallbanger Cup.
We're trying to push the show through so we could get done and get out of there.
And then track officials decided to add a second round of heat races to the show to extend it. So when we heard that, it was like, we were hoping to get out of here and fly down to Grove to see the Wallbanger, but we didn't get a chance to see it. And I did see a lot of video. We had a lot of Moxie cameras down there on some cars, and I will say that watching that race on video from where we posted our video, like people broadcasting live, I saw some of that, and some of the in-car camera action, I can't remember seeing in Cottage Grove that dusty.
No, I was really shocked how dusty it was. It was probably not one of the better tracks I've ever seen at Cottage Grove.
Well, track conditions have been a hot topic all year here in the Northwest, and I think we're at a point now where we've got the moisture out of them. We're getting into the hot part of the summer, and we're going to start seeing hopefully the slick, smooth tracks that we all want.
But that was also the night that Brian Crockett was down south doing the tracks for Edric.
Was it Calistoga?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Brian, I mean, great track prep guy. I mean, he really knows his stuff.
Is that who does the Grove?
Yeah.
He's got Grove dialed in pretty nice.
He knows what's going on down there. But, the track, it didn't look bad from what I saw in the video. It just looked really dusty.
It didn't really get much better until probably about halfway to 2/3 of the way through that street stock race. About then is about when you could finally start hearing the tires squealing on it.
Right. Start taking rubber and putting some traction down.
Right.
Yeah. Tough field of cars down there for the Wallbanger Cup.
Did you notice the the times in the main?
I didn't get to see any of that.
There was one car out of the 17s. Everybody else was all in the 17-second bracket. And that one car that was in the 18s only did one lap. So it's hard to say what he really did. So, I mean, that's how tight that field was.
24 cars started that race?
20.
20. Okay, I heard 24, and I thought that's an awful lot on that little track. 20. That's perfect for Cottage Grove. I mean, you don't need any more than that on that little track, but that's 20. You look at the names in that was 20 really good race cars for anybody to pick up a win there. They can be proud of that one.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's it's quite the accomplishment. It's you look at how far back Kyle started too, 12th. I mean, as far back as you could start by qualifying straight into the main, and and the first one car spun, so they had to do a complete restart. He actually had a better start on the first start. He got like 5 cars on the first lap. The first start, and I think everybody goes, "Oh crap, he's coming up through here." So they kept it tighter on the second restart.
Yeah, but watching the videos, we did have cameras mounted in Langen's car, and we saw Langen spin, which sucks for him, but it was good for our video because he had to go to the back, and work his way through, and you got to see what a lot of guys were doing.
Make for some good footage.
It did. Well, we saw good footage, from the 29 of Kronk and Schott, and I mean, we saw some really good footage in that race. I mean, even as fast as Langen is, especially at Cottage Grove, he wasn't moving through that field as fast, I think, as anybody, especially myself, expected him to. That is one of the toughest street stock fields that I think I've seen at any race anywhere in the Pacific Northwest with the 2017 Wallbanger Cup. Phenomenal.
Yeah, and you listen to that in-car. I don't know if it was that one or the week before, but I think it was the week before, actually. You listen to Langham's cameras down there, and I'll tell you, he's got a lot of motor. And you put G60s on a dry slick track, and if you got a lot of motor, it's real hard to have that good of a foot to get all you can out of that tire.
Well, that's the thing. You're on a tire that's so narrow, and then we know what the G60 does with a heat cycle. You get them hot, and they can change from running through a caution period and back to green. It can be a completely different tire. We've seen it by a lot of guys.
I mean, a lot of people think Kyle's running a big motor, but it's big cubic inch, but it's only a 10.2 to 1 motor. It's a flat tappet cam. It's not even a roller cam. We were building it to be legal to go into as modified and run on pump gas. We tried it once. We burned up a piston on pump gas, and that's when we switched to the E85. And it's been the E85 is kind of nice. It's like 260-something a gallon.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I've heard that
as opposed to 10,
times, right?
10, 12.
Exactly. I mean, so we're not running huge horsepower, which is part of our key.
Well, and I'll agree with you 100%. We know that, especially on tracks like, let's just use Willamette Speedway, it is not a horsepower racetrack, especially in August when it's 95 degrees outside. You're not going to hook up 800 horse. You're not going to.
Really?
You're not going to. Bob Jeffrey was the perfect example of that when he won 18 races and 22 starts with that V6. That thing only had about 260 horsepower.
Yeah, but...
or 200, I'm sorry,
Rob May might argue that with you.
260 cubic inches. It was like 252.
Yeah, it had a lot more.
It had about 500 horse.
Yeah.
But that's also in the days that there was no scales. And
but there was no weight rule. There was no weight rule either.
And I have no idea exactly what that car weighed, but I've heard rumors between 12 and 1,400 pounds.
Whoa.
And Bob liked to drill a bit to make things lighter any place that he thought could lose half an ounce.
He did, and it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, I know
that
the
weight rule. What the heck?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, back then, that was before the weight rule really started. I think it was 96 we really started putting in the weight rules, and 97 when they started going away from the sideboards and conforming to what the rest of the nation was doing. But yeah, we've seen cars out there, like you said, weighing 1,600 pounds, full late models with the driver in them.
And you take cornering, it's a lot easier to make, 1,100 pounds hook up compared to 2,000 pounds to hook up going around the corner.
Right.
Plus, it stops a lot quicker going into the corner.
Right. So, it was... It's interesting to see where things have gone, but the street stocks, how more things are going. The street stocks, I don't know what to think about this class right now.
I don't either.
I like
street stocks.
My favorite class.
Too.
My favorite class.
Yes.
I like what they're doing. I don't know if I like where they're going because they're getting to the point where they're not street stocks anymore, and they're going to price themselves into a whole nother division.
Yeah, we got to get things clarified. Like, really, where is the firewall supposed to be? Like if you have a firewall in the stock location on a metric car, you cannot get the engine back to where number one spark plug lines up with the ball joints, the lower ball joints. Right. You just can't do it. So if it is, the firewall is obviously not in stock location anymore. So if if you read the rules now, it really doesn't say stock location. It just has to have it in there. So, we're looking at it now going, okay, let's just cut the firewall out.